We're continuing our journal stitching and we're talking today about templates. I'm going to show you some tips and tricks on how to stitch the templates and different options about how to embellish them. There's so many options. I'm glad you're here. Let's get started. First, I'm going to be using this mini snowflake template. And you can see how small it is when I put it down on this grid, that it's smaller than 1 inch all the way around. It's part of my set of 16 nature and seasons inspired templates. And so I placed the template where I wanted it to be, and I traced around it with a Frixion Erasable Pen. For these mini templates, I recommend using the 5-point, which is finer, and it's much easier to trace around a template with this finer point pen. So I have begun stitching the snowflake. I'm using Wonderful Spaghetti 12-weight thread, and that is roughly equivalent to 2 strands of embroidery floss. Either one will work here. So what I've begun to do is stitch in the middle of the snowflake. Once you've traced it, you can see these diamond shapes in the center of the snowflake. And I'm starting by stitching each diamond shape. So in a sense, this is negative space stitching. Because when you're looking at the diamonds, your view of the snowflake almost reverses. If that doesn't make sense to you, that's okay. Just stitch those diamond shapes. So I'm taking 1 stitch for each side of the diamond, and then I'm moving to the next diamond and stitching those 4 sides. And when I've completed stitching all the sides, then I'm going to start stitching the outline. And I'm taking 1 stitch per mark. So each line is getting 1 stitch. Now the important thing to do, if you stitched your diamonds this way, is to connect the top of those diamonds to the corners at the very top. If those stitching lines don't connect, then your snowflake will end up looking like a circle with some diamonds in it. So I'm making sure when I move around the outside that I bring that stitch that's closest to the diamond, the tip of the diamond, right down into that stitch so they're touching and connected. So I work my way around until I get to my last side. And just as I'm finishing, you can see my thread gets a little knot in it, which I can easily pull out. And the reason that happened is because I neglected to use a thread conditioner. So here are 2 thread conditioners, or wax, that I use to condition my thread when I remember. And I'll show you how they work. So this first one has a cap that you remove, and the thread conditioner is sitting in the top of that little pot. And you can pull your thread right across the top. And for this one, which has beeswax inside, there are these little slots on both sides where you can slip your thread down into the wax and pull it through. So for this wax, you take your threaded needle and you pull it right through that slot so your thread is touching that beeswax, and you pull it all the way through. And then it's good to take your fingers and glide it right along the thread to distribute that evenly. And there's 2 ways that you can use the thread conditioner that's in one of these pots. You can put your thread down and hold it with your finger, and then with your other hand you can pull that thread through. Or you can pop the lid back on with your thread coming through those slots on the side, and that helps to hold the thread in place. It provides some tension as you pull it through. And then just be sure to distribute that thread conditioner on your thread. And for the most part, that's going to help prevent tangles while you're stitching. So I'm just going to finish the last few stitches here across the top. And now my snowflake is complete. I could leave this as is, or I could bring in some white thread and stitch inside that snowflake to give it that beautiful white snowflake color. It's really up to you. When it comes to templates, there's so many different ways that you can stitch them. You can fill them in completely or not at all. So let's take a look at a few of the ways that I have stitched templates on this journal piece. So one option, of course, is to simply outline your template. I've done that here. I've also done that with this leaf. And the color that you choose is going to make a big difference to the impression that it gives. So choosing red for this makes it look to me like it's a maple leaf, which was my intention. And I'm so happy with the outline that I don't feel like I want to fill it in. Now in contrast to that, I stitched this dog and I added some really subtle stitching. And so from far away, it looks very different than a simple outline. You can always stitch part of a template, like I did here, just adding the wing. I could also add an eye if I wanted, or I can just leave it. I like the subtle effect of this. There's texture, there's some stitching, but it's not completely filled in. And then of course, there's the option to completely fill in your stitching, like I did here. I added 2 shades of red, I added French knots, and another color for the stem. So all 5 of the templates I've used on this piece so far are completely different. There's lots of room to experiment and try things out. So I really hope when you use these templates, you give yourself permission to try all sorts of techniques. Until next time, happy stitching.